Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Peart, and welcome to the Salt-Tea Podcast. I'm so glad you're here to join in on another TGI Fun Science Friday. And TGI stands for Thank God or Thank Goodness It's Fun Science Friday. Salt-Tea Science episodes air on Fridays so that regardless of what type of week you've had, you can end it on a high note and jumpstart your weekend with some fun marine science. And Salt-Tea Science is just the perfect way to end your week and start your weekend. And of course, perchance you're not listening to this episode on a Friday, just insert your fun day of the week. For you, it could be TGI Fun Science Monday or Tuesday or whatever day it is for you right now that you're enjoying this podcast episode. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to say welcome to all of our new listeners. Anchor has notified me that the audience count is increasing, which is totally exciting because the Salt-Tea Science movement is beginning to take off. Okay, so last week was our very first Animal Spotlight episode featuring the Atlantic sturgeon, which I just wanted to let you know that last Saturday I was invited to work a shift for the Virginia Institute of Marine Science outreach program at the Yorktown Maritime Market in Yorktown, Virginia. And they had the same display set up as they did at the Urbana Oyster Festival. And I just want to say that because of last week's episode, I was ready to answer all of the Atlantic sturgeon questions. Alright, so as you know, last week we had an animal spotlight, but as I was thinking about it this week, we can't spotlight the fauna or animals without putting the spotlight on the flora or plants, because there are so many different types of aquatic plants that play a huge role and have a really big impact on local ecosystems, as well as global oxygen production and food webs that they're worth highlighting. And so in deciding which plant to highlight this week, I decided to take a step back and to highlight a very important group of plants rather than just one. So what we'll be discussing in this week's episode is what we call Submerged Aquatic Vegetation, which we often just refer to as SAV. And I'm excited about this episode because we're going to be tying in concepts and terms we've been discussing in previous episodes, such as salinity and light and temperature. And I just want to say that this episode is dedicated to Dr. Elizabeth Lacey at Stockton University, because she was the first person, through her enthusiasm for SAV, who showed me just how exciting SAV can be and how important they are to us economically as well as ecologically all over the world. So Dr. Lacey, I hope this episode does you proud. Okay, so what are SAVs? SAVs are submerged aquatic vegetation, which refers to flowering vascular plants that grow in fresh, brackish, and salt water all around the world. And vascular plants are plants that have roots, stems, and leaves, just like the plants that you're familiar with on land. And one really cool thing about SAVs is that they can tolerate a variety of climates and can be found all over the world. They're found in waters near tropical islands and along our continental coastal regions, and they've even been found under Arctic sea ice. And SAVs are incredibly biodiverse, meaning that there are a lot of different species, and many of them resemble grass that you see on land. So sometimes you'll hear people refer to SAV as seagrass, but seagrasses are only one type of SAV. There are many other different types as well. And SAVs are often confused with algae and seaweed. But remember, SAV are flowering plants similar to the plants found on land. And they're just very different than algae and seaweed. For instance, SAVs have roots, which are like pretty much all of the plants which you're already familiar with, whereas algae and seaweed don't. And SAVs also have what's called rhizomes, which are horizontally growing underground stems, which aid roots in the absorbing of nutrients as well as in anchoring the plant. And they also have veins and vessels which help transport nutrients and water throughout the plant. And then they also have leaves which are supported by the stems. And SAVs also have flowers which grow on stalks, and in some species the flowers may even grow above the water. However, like trees, some species of SAV only flower at a particular time of year. Okay, so what determines where a SAV can live and grow? Well, there are many different factors that determine where and how well a SAV will grow and survive. These include light, salinity, temperature, substrate, and water quality. So let's talk about light for a moment. Like all plants, SAV need light in order to carry out photosynthesis, which is the process by which they produce the energy that they need to grow and to survive. And just to let you know, while plants and SAVs photosynthesize, they also produce that wonderful thing called oxygen, which we are able to breathe. So thank you, SAVs. And among plants, SAV have some of the highest light requirements. And for this reason, they're only found in shallow, clear waters. And so you'll remember from episode 10, light in water attenuates or decreases in intensity the deeper you go. So you won't find SAVs in deeper water where there's just a little bit of light, and you definitely won't find SAVs in the aphotic zone where there's absolutely no sunlight. And then of course we can't forget about turbulence or suspended particles in the water, because the more stuff that's in the water also means the less light that's reaching the bottom where the SAVs grow. Okay, so now let's talk about salinity, or the salt concentration of the water, because salinity is also extremely important to SAV and influences which species can live and grow where. Some SAVs, like for instance manatee grass and turtle grass, do really well in very salty water, so you'll find them off beaches, especially beaches off the Florida Keys. Other SAVs, however, like eelgrass, can tolerate saltier water but can also do well in slightly less salty water, or in regions we call polyhaline. And then you have some SAVs that don't do very well with salty water at all, so you'll only find them in regions of bays and estuaries and coastal areas where the salt concentration or salinity is super low. And these regions we often refer to as oligohaline and mesohaline. And then of course you have SAVs like widgeon grass that can tolerate a wide variety of salinities, and so they can be found in salty water as well as brackish water. Okay, so now let's talk about substrate, or the type of ground that they need to grow in. So just like different land plants need different types of soils, different SAVs need different types of bottom surfaces. Some species need sandy substrates, while others prefer mud or silt. And finally, of course, a variety of other physical and chemical factors, including water movement and the nutrient content of the water, also impacts SAV growth. Okay, so now it's time for our 1-minute summary. In this episode, we talked about submerged aquatic vegetation, also known as SAV. SAVs are flowering, vascular plants that grow in fresh, brackish, and salt water all around the world, from tropical waters all the way up to the Arctic. And as vascular plants, they have roots, stems, and leaves, and will even produce flowers, just like the plants you're familiar with on land. And SAVs are incredibly biodiverse, meaning that there's lots and lots of different types of species. And a lot of SAVs resemble grass, and will often be referred to as seagrasses. But seagrasses are only one type of SAV. There are many, many more. And remember that SAVs are not to be confused with algae or seaweed. Those are just a completely different group of aquatic flora. And finally, there are many different factors that determine where and how well a SAV will grow and survive. These include light, salinity, temperature, substrate, and water quality. SAVs need plenty of sunlight, so while they're found all over the world, they're generally only found in shallow water where the water is clear enough so that plenty of light can reach the bottom. And that's the end of our 1-minute summary. Okay, so now for the big question. Why do we care? Well, SAVs are extremely important. Not only are they beautiful, but they provide so many different types of ecological services. They sequester carbon, stabilize sediments, and they provide food for many different species. For instance, do you know why manatee grass is called manatee grass? Yep, you guessed it. Manatees like to eat this particular type of SAV. And SAVs also provide homes for many different species, and even serve as a nursery for many different commercial fish, which also makes them a fun place to go snorkeling, because you'll be surprised at all the different marine animals you'll find. And finally, SAVs also help keep the water healthy, a term we often refer to as water quality. So yes, SAVs are super important and we should totally care about them. And listeners, if you come up with any additional reasons why we should care, I would love to hear about them. So email me at saltysciencepodcast@gmail.com. Alright, so before we end this episode, I'll remind you to check out the Salty Science Weebly page. That's saltysciencepodcast.weebly.com, because I've already posted some great pictures and some special links that accompany each episode, including this episode. And once again, I'll let you all know that I'm officially recruiting Salty Science crew members. If you like the show and would like to show your support and join the Salty Science family, you can go to the Salty Science Patreon page and join our crew today. Crew members will not only have special access to fun content on the Patreon page, but will also receive members-only goodie bags and special shoutouts from me. So make sure you sign up today, because I'd love to have you a part of the Salty Science crew. Okay, so until next time, don't forget to do your thing to help keep our oceans clean and to always stay salty. Thank you for listening to Salt-Tea Science. But guess what? You don't have to let the fun end here. Go to www.saltysciencepodcast.weebly.com, where I've posted some cool videos, my study notes, and some really neat experiments that you can try at home. And if you want to follow along with my own research, you can follow me on Instagram. User handle Teps Adventure. That's TEPS Adventure. All Salt-Tea Science episodes are available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, and YouTube, plus a number of other podcasting apps. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, as this is the best way to spread the word about this podcast. Salt-Tea Science is listener supported, so if you would like to show your support, visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/Salt-Tea Science, where you can either make a one-time donation of any amount or join the Salt-Tea Science crew for as little as $1 a month. So visit the Salt-Tea Science Patreon and sign up today.